All right, so today's message is for those investors who are looking to grow their portfolio. Perhaps you are already invested and you have a portfolio and you want to continue to grow it. But I know for most of my audience, it's investors that might be brand new or somewhat newer in the space. And I try to encourage you guys and gals and put the word out there about how you can either get in the game or grow your portfolio with the use of different types of funding and financing. Okay, so again, my name is Luther Wilson III. For those that don't know, I'm a real estate practitioner here in the Kansas City market. I'm an investor. I have a small portfolio with a couple business partners as well. And a lot of the stuff that I've talked about on previous videos and on social media are things that we've gone through, opportunities that we see in the market, and how, again, you might be able to get in and make the process more efficient. All right, so I talk about capital strategy and operations, and so I'm going to get into some of that today for sure, but most of it is going to be tied around the capital piece. Okay, so for the most part, for most investors, you're going to be using some type of debt, some type of mortgage, okay? And we often refer to that as first lien position debt. And that's usually the long-term debt, whether it's, 15 years, 25 or 30 years, okay? Sometimes it's interest only. At other times there may be a balloon that is coming due in 2, 3, 5 years or whatever. And then our favorite, and I've heard it referred to as the gold standard for real estate investors, is the 30-year fixed rate mortgage, meaning that the interest rate remains the same over the entire course of the loan. Okay, you could pay it off early if you want. A lot of times there's a prepayment penalty if you pay it off within the first 5 years. Okay, so that's a little bit on the first lien position debt. All right, then over and above that, there's usually some type of additional capital that's required, and it can come from you, it could come from a business partner, it can come from another lender who would be in second lien position, and it could be a family member, a friend, or an associate. Okay, so in that case, you got the first lien position debt, and then on top of that, depending on how it's structured, it could either be private equity or a private loan, okay? It could be, again, the private equity, someone owns that property with you, or it's a private mortgage that may be secured or unsecured in second lien position. All right, so I bring this up because, today is Monday, September 29th, 2025, and interest rates went up a couple years ago. There's been more volatility in the various markets besides just real estate, okay? And we're living in some very interesting and challenging times, not just in the US, but globally. And so for those investors, again, and those real estate practitioners, you may be a service provider who works with investors or property owners. You eventually want to grow your portfolio. And for most of us, the intention is to create revenue, okay? It could be cash flow. And then along with that, you are growing your equity position. You are growing your net worth as you grow your investment portfolio, hopefully, if it's done correctly and if it's done well and efficiently, okay? Because sometimes we get into a deal or an opportunity and there may not be the spread or the cash flow or the equity, and it ends up being just a learning experience, because not all investments in real estate especially, and especially if you're using short-term debt, second lien position debt, you might be taking on renovation projects as well. Okay, so at the end of, the time where you're either renting the property or creating cash flow somehow, there may not be any equity at all. And so again, I want to encourage y'all, like, hey, if that happens, it's happened for me, it's happened for some of my clients and a bunch of my colleagues, not to, get discouraged, but say, hey, let's chalk it up, and hopefully you can persist and continue to grow and add more to your portfolio. And at the end of a 3-year span, let's say, or maybe a 5 to 10 year span, some of those investments that didn't work out so well, or maybe you had to sell off and take some losses, it can kind of balance out with some of the other investments in your portfolio. Okay, so the capital stack. I mentioned that a few weeks ago on a YouTube video and on social media. What I referred to earlier when I mentioned the first lien position debt in either a private equity position or a private loan, that is part of your capital stack, okay? And so again, with all of the stuff going on in the US and globally, the changes in the economy and financially, politically, socially, it's important to really have, it may not be you directly, but someone on your team or your business partner or the operator who is helping to run the real estate investing firm, they need to have a general idea of what's going on in that said market and, globally and in the US as well, so that you can make the process more efficient. Because what was working really well for a lot of us investors between, let's say, 2018 and 2022, prior to interest rates going up, that strategy or that method of being able to get in and grow your portfolio may not be working so well in 2025 and then going beyond that. Okay, so back to the capital stack. If we are planning to use some type of debt, some type of leverage, right? And we want to get in, we got to be mindful about how we're going to make that happen. Okay, so a common way to be able to grow a portfolio is what is referred to as the BRRRR strategy. And I know I've brought it up before, and some of y'all are familiar with it. I have to bring it up because between those years, 2018 and even before that, but between 2018 and 2022, like I mentioned, we were able to use the BRRRR strategy quite well. Well, after interest rates went up and after we began to feel the volatility and the effects of higher inflation and the different economic and social and political things, it's a little more challenging. It's not impossible. I know investors that are still making it happen, but we have to be mindful about how we're going to go about doing that. Again, the BRRRR strategy: buy, renovate, rent, refinance, and repeat. Okay, so a lot of times when investors are doing that, they're using some type of short-term debt. It could be a hard money loan, or it could be some type of commercial loan, or it could be cash from a business partner, family member, friend, associate, as I mentioned. Okay, so when you're doing that, you have to get through the renovation process, because a lot of times when you're using that short-term debt, you have 6 to 12 months, maybe a little bit longer, to be able to have all of that debt paid off. And the interesting thing that I've seen over the last couple years, right, is that in some cases, not all cases, like I said, it does not make as good a sense to do the BRRRR strategy, because you get in, you go over budget on the rehab project, you go past the deadline for the completion, or you go past the deadline for when you were you were supposed to pay off that short-term debt, so you're paying additional points or additional interest. Okay, so an example, like I was on the phone with one of my business partners a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about this same thing. He and I have been rocking together since 2019. And this stuff is fresh on my mind because he and this business partner and my other business partner and some of my clients and colleagues are going through a similar thing. I mentioned to my partner, okay, I said, look, like it's not working so well. That's why I pumped the brakes in 2023. I haven't bought a property since then. I want to, but I'm being more discerning and selective about who I take through that process and how we go about doing it, because the capital requirements it's a little different. And I told my business partner, I said, look, you can get in and rehab the property, okay? We had one example, I brought it up. We went over budget by, I don't even remember the exact amount. Let's say we went over budget 12 grand, right? Which is not uncommon on a renovation project, okay? And with the hard money loan that we used, we went past the 6-month period, so we had to pay additional points to extend it out. And then we also needed to pay interest to that hard money lender, okay? And that totaled, okay, about $14,000, okay? So we bought this property. It was off market, solid deal, decent little C-class area in KCMO, right? We, went through the rehab process. We went over budget 12 grand, right? Then once we were done and it was time to pay the lender off, right? We ended up, on that one, we flipped it, right? Which is not really what I wanted to do, but because it was, part way, actually it was 2023 already and the shifts had already started. So the 12 grand that we went over budget, right? Plus the 14 grand, that's 26,000 additional dollars, okay? That me and my business partner had to come up with. So we came up with it, okay? We had to bring in additional capital. And meanwhile, we were in the middle of other properties. We had already done, a dozen deals or so, right? And some of them we had kept, some of them we sold off. But that was just one example. It happened multiple times. And at the end of the 3 or 4 year period, 5-year period that we were rocking together doing multiple deals, we still have our portfolio, okay? We did make some profits on some wholesale and that fix and flip deal. It wasn't a whole lot, but there were some profits there. But as I mentioned before, we had to source additional capital, not just from that one example that I mentioned, where it came out to be about $26,000 additional that we had to come up with, but it happened on multiple properties. So at the end of the 5-year period, we have our portfolio, we made some profits, okay? The business that is, but we still ended up owing our private money lenders over $100,000, okay? So that's what a lot of investors, I feel and know, are going through right now. Some of them, it may have just happened on one, where they bought a property, used a hard money loan, rehabbed it, sold it, made no profits, and then they got a bill from the hard money lender. They did a fix and flip, lost money, and then got a bill from the hard money lender. That's one example. And then there's another example, rather. And then I could go on the list because, people tell me stuff, but like as you're growing your portfolio, you got to imagine if you're doing that 5, 10, 30 plus times in a year, how efficient is that? Again, I want to encourage you guys and gals, educate, inspire. Education, inspiration, collaboration is what I'm all about. As I go forward, this is helpful for me to reflect back as I bring in new clients and new business partners and so forth. And then I can share that with y'all as well, so that maybe you can see a more efficient way to be able to do it, which leads me to, maybe going the traditional route to get into a property. If you can get in by doing some type of creative real estate transaction, and it's on the up and up, and it's documented and done well. Either way you go, right? You're gonna, at some point or another, gonna need additional capital for the gap funds, for the reserves when a property may go vacant after you've added it to your portfolio. That's very common too. Okay, so you build your portfolio. Not all of your tenants or your residents are going to pay, and not all of them are going to stay. And when you're dealing with the renegotiation, whether it's cash for keys or an eviction, or if they just leave on their own accord and you don't necessarily go after them, you gotta cover the cost of the mortgage, the first lien position debt. And hopefully it's a 30-year fixed rate mortgage. Again, the gold standard. So again, like, either way works, either way can work very well, whether you're doing the BRRRR strategy or if you're getting in the traditional route, which I am in favor of now. I'm in favor of all of it, really. The BRRRR strategy, going the traditional route, whether you put 20 to 30% down, and then on those rare occasions, right, when you can get in and take over someone's existing mortgage, or perhaps you find a tired landlord or an investor or a property owner who owns their property outright, which is somewhat common, okay, not completely uncommon in today's market. They may be willing to carry the paper and do seller financing for you. I'm in favor of all of it. All of it works. All of it can work very well. But again, it's on me, it's on your operator, it's on your team, your business partner, or it's on you if you are on the ground trying to make this thing happen. At the end of the day, it goes back to the capital stack and then the opportunities that come your way in that window of time. There's different opportunities that may come your way throughout the years where, okay, cool, like the BRRRR strategy is working great. All right, cool. Now we're seeing more foreclosures. Okay, cool. Now people are walking away from their homes. Okay, great. We might be able to do some seller carrybacks and some sub twos. But again, the capital requirement is still there. Okay, I kind of alluded to it earlier, and it happened to me a couple times where we get in and you do the BRRRR strategy, right? Thinking that you're gonna be able to refinance and recoup most of, if not all of your initial investment capital, or your partners or your private equity or your private lenders capital, whoever is supplying that, right? You think you may be able to get through that project and recoup all your initial investment capital. But when you go over budget 12 grand and you pay your hard money lender 14 grand, that's 26 grand. So on paper, you thought you were going to be all in at 80% of the after repair value, when in actuality, you were all in at maybe 93, 95% of the after repair value. Whereas if you may have went the traditional route and you sourced the capital in a manner that ideally is long-term, ideally is, private equity, and not so ideally, and pretty common from what I see, it's second lien position debt, or it may be, interest only and have a balloon that comes due, and it can wreck your portfolio, or at least wreck part of your portfolio. So again, at the end of the day, at the end of the 3 years or 5 years or 10 years or longer, as you're getting in and you're transacting and you're finding opportunities and you're raising capital, you got to think about these things and what your end game, what the goal is going to be. Hopefully, again, it's to increase your revenue, okay, increase your cash flow. Again, on some of them, there's not going to be much cash flow at all. Or perhaps if on one of them there is cash flow, there may not be on another one, okay? And then at the end of that time frame, however long it is and however many doors that you have, what does it really look like? Again, like the first lien position debt, if there's private equity, if there's second lien position debt, maybe you are in a position, one of the rare few who's using their own money and is able to do it repeatedly At the end of that time frame, are you actually all in, okay, at 80 to 90% of the, property or portfolio value, if that makes sense, okay? So again, this is fresh on my mind because I'm working through some challenging situations with both my business partners, worked through a number of challenging situations with clients over the last 15 years that I've been at it, serving investors, and I want to bring more encouragement, bring more awareness about how to make this thing happen more efficiently, because at the end of that time frame, it's just got to make sense that and hopefully you're paying down the mortgages, and hopefully you're not refinancing too often because you may have to start over again. The 30-year mortgage is great, but part of my goal, and hopefully some of your intentions, is to pay that debt down as you grow your portfolio, or maybe you get your portfolio to a certain point and you are steady focusing on, operating that investment firm if you're the operator, or if you have an operator like me who you can work with. That's a huge play right there. So then you can look at it and say, okay, the 6 properties that I have with my business partner, or right now, we had, roughly $830,000 in first lien position debt. Okay, then there's the capital that my business partner and I put up, which is probably about $75,000. Oh wait, then there's the second lien position debt that we used from private money lenders, and that was now $82,000. And we can look at, okay, those houses have gone up in value, we've paid down the debt, and the spread in between there, right? That's how you're able to calculate your net worth, splitting that up, of course, between you and your partner, or you and your equity investors, or you and your syndication partners, that type of thing. All right, so I'm gonna leave it at that. If you made it this far, appreciate you tuning in. I'm active on social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram are my go-tos. All right, so stay tuned as we continue to drop more videos, and feel free to reach out if you have a real estate need or want to know more. All right, thanks y'all, peace.